His world didn't just end, it was meticulously deconstructed, molecule by molecule, before his very eyes. The man who had orchestrated this demolition, this rewriting of his soul, stood over him, his dark eyes holding not malice, but a chilling, scientific satisfaction. And as Kyle Santos, the architect of the Rios Syndicate, gasped for breath on the floor of his own study, the words that would become his new reality echoed in the silent room. "You are not a true Alpha, Kyle Santos. You never were." The scent in the air was wrong. It was his own, yet it was alien. A bizarre metallic tang that had usurped the familiar, potent aroma of dominance he had carried his entire life. He was trembling, not with rage, but with a profound, bone-deep terror. His body, the vessel of his power and his identity, had betrayed him completely. He was a fortress breached, a king dethroned in his own throne room, and the quiet, imposing figure before him held the keys to his ruin and, impossibly, his rebirth. To understand the cataclysm that shattered Kyle's existence, we must return to the beginning, to a sterile concrete box buried deep beneath the earth. Within this containment unit, a being known only as Subject 734 existed. He was a creature of myth and cold, hard data, an enigma. He didn't measure time in days, but in the subtle degradation of the recycled air, the precise intervals between the nutrient-paced deliveries, and the shifting chemical signatures of the wardens outside his door. Fear smelled like burnt sugar, boredom like stale ozone. He was a prisoner, yes, but he was also a scientist in his own right, and his subject of study was the system that held him captive. He called himself Leo, a name he'd chosen for its simple finality, and he spent every waking moment plotting the magnificent, fiery demise of his world. His own formidable biology was a muted symphony, suppressed by years of chemical inhibitors and confinement, but his mind was a razor, honed sharp on the whetstone of isolation and a singular, burning-purposed vengeance. The first distant boom was the opening note of the overture he had been waiting for. A raw, guttural alarm screeched through the facility, a vibration that hummed in his very bones. Outside his cell, the Alpha guards, predictable in their aggression, tensed. Their scent signatures spiked with a cocktail of confusion and hostility. This was no drill. A flicker of something that might have been satisfaction stirred in Leo's chest. The system was beginning to fail. And then came a new sound. Footsteps, not the hurried, clipped rhythm of the military personnel, but something heavier, more deliberate. A presence was approaching, preceded by a complex and commanding scent signature. It was Alpha, unquestionably, but layered with the expensive, sharp notes of bespoke cologne, the acrid tang of fresh gunpowder, and a strange, discordant undertone that Lero's trade's hypersensitive senses struggled to classify. It was like a well-masked weariness, a hint of regret buried beneath mountains of authority. This was not one of the simple brutes who patrolled these halls. This was someone different. The reinforced steel door hissed open, revealing a man who seemed to command the very space he occupied. Kyle Santos. A name Leo knew from fragmented data intercepts. A high-ranking capo in the Rios Syndicate, known as the Architect for his meticulous and brutal efficiency. Kyle was the very picture of Alpha dominance, of broad shoulders straining the fabric of a perfectly tailored suit, a jawline that looked like it could cut diamond, and eyes the color of a gathering thunderhead. His scent was a declaration of power, a potent blend of old money and new world violence. His gaze swept the cell, expecting to find a broken specimen, a cowering lab rat. Instead, he found Leo seated on the simple cot, radiating in unnerving, profound stillness. Those dark, emotionless eyes simply watched him. Then, with a liquid grace that defied years of confinement, Leo unfolded himself from the cot. And he kept rising. Kyler Eurostrade's internal monologue, usually a smooth, commanding narrative, faltered. He was a euros taller, considerably so. Easily a full head above Kyler Eurostrade's own formidable stature. Leo was built like a predator, lean and taut with a contained power that was visible in the corded muscles of his arms and the elegant length of his limbs. "He's bigger than me," a primal, snarling voice screamed from the depths of Kyle's alpha consciousness. The thought was an insult, a physical affront to his entire being. In any room, in any confrontation, Kyle Santos was always the most physically imposing presence. It was a fundamental law of his universe. To be overshadowed, to have to physically look up at a captive, a subject, was a violation that grated against the very core of his pride. Subject 734. Kyler Eurostrade's voice was a low, controlled rumble, a masterful performance of calm amidst the surrounding chaos. "You're coming with me." Leo didn't move. His face was a placid mask. "And what reason would I have for that, Alpha?" The voice was cool, a perfectly level tone devoid of fear or deference. It was a challenge delivered with a casual air of a man inquiring about the weather. Leo watched a microscopic flicker in Kyle's pheromones, the spark of irritation beneath the ironclad control. A ghost of a smile touched Leo's lips, so fleeting it might have been imagined. "He believes he is the one holding all the cards." How quaint. Because Kyle stepped into the cell, his storm cloud eyes locking with Leo's dark, placid pools. "Your other options are to remain here and be vivisected by individuals with even less regard for your comfort than I have, or to be captured by the Corvid Syndicate. And trust me, they lack a certain finesse. Finesse. An interesting descriptor from a man whose hands are steeped in blood, Alpha. The mockery in Lear Eurostrade's voice was subtle, a razor's edge wrapped in silk. Kyle's jaw tightened into a knot of granite. "Get up." The words were imbued with the inherent command of his dynamic, an expectation of immediate obedience that had governed his entire life. Leo simply tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "I find I am not inclined to do so." In that moment, a wave of pure, undiluted alpha dominance erupted from Kyle. He covered the distance between them in two powerful strides, his hand clamping around Lear Eurostrade's arm. The grip was meant to crush, to assert his physical superiority, his absolute will. He squeezed, expecting a wince, a yielding of muscle. Instead, he found flesh and bone that felt like finely coiled, unyielding steel. "You have no choice in the matter," Kyle snarled, yanking him forward. Their eyes met again, inches apart, and Kyle felt Euros a bizarre resonance, a silent, thrumming challenge that clawed at the foundations of his pride. This was not the posture of a submissive. This was a rebellion held in a state of perfect, simmering containment, made all the more infuriating by Leo's undeniable physical superiority. Their journey through the labyrinthine facility was a symphony of controlled chaos. Alarms blared, their klaxons a desperate scream against the rhythmic punctuation of gunfire. Kyler Eurostrade's men, a highly disciplined unit of alphas and beaters, moved with lethal efficiency, carving a path through the panicked lab security. All the while, Leo, supposedly a captive being led by the arm, moved with a dancer's grace, his eyes constantly scanning, absorbing every detail of the layout, every weakness in the enemy's formation. Kyle found himself catching glimpses of that sharp, aristocratic profile, the elegant line of his neck, and the unsettling depth in those dark eyes, all framed by a height that made Kyle feel strangely, unpleasantly a Euro's compact. A dangerous, calculating mind was at work behind that placid far a tilde section a day, and that disturbed Kyle far more than any physical threat ever could. He thinks this is his victory, Leto mused, allowing Kyle to drag him along, making a show of compliance while his mind catalogued the operational procedures of Kyler Eurostrade's team. Let him have his illusion. For now, he offered no resistance beyond that initial test of strength in the cell. He was, in fact, intensely curious. The intelligence he had gathered on Kyle Santos was sparse but tantalizing, a Mafia prince with a reputation for both shocking brutality and an almost inconveniently brilliant strategic mind. But more importantly, there was the anomaly. That subtle discord in Kyle's pheromonal signature, a faint, almost imperceptible wrongness that Leo, even with his powers suppressed, could detect. This wasn't just an escape. It was an unparalleled opportunity, a chance to study this unique alpha up close, to confirm his suspicions about the anomaly, to find the weapon he had been dreaming of. So he allowed himself to be led, not from a position of weakness, but from a calculated desire to gather information, to learn the nature of his unwitting liberator. He thinks he's running the show, Kyle thought, pulling Leo sharply around a corner as a burst of plasma fire scorched the wall where they had just been. I'll make sure he understands the hierarchy here. But even as the thought took shape, another sensation, quiet and insidious, began to worm its way into his awareness. A faint, almost sweet scent was beginning to weave itself into the cacophony of smoke, fear, and cordite. It was subtle, yet insistent, and it was emanating from Leo. And it was doing something strange to Kyler Eurostrade's own biological signals, creating a curious, almost prickly sensation just beneath his skin, like an invisible rash on his very soul. He brutally suppressed it. He was an alpha. He was in control. The safe house was a monument to minimalist wealth, a penthouse apartment encased in glass, offering a god's eye view of the sprawling city below. It was another cage, just one with a better view. For the first few days, the tension between them was so thick it felt like a third person in the room, a silent, watchful entity. Kyle had anticipated defiance, perhaps even violence. What he hadn't prepared for was the cold, analytical intelligence that met his every move. Leo was a ghost in the machine of the penthouse. He spent hours simply observing, his dark eyes missing nothing, his movements silent and deliberate. His presence was a quiet weight that filled every corner of the vast, sterile space. Leo was an unsolved equation that grated on every one of Kyle's instincts, which screamed for comprehension, for dominance, for control. After several hours of this suffocating silence, as the adrenaline from their violent escape finally began to ebb, Leo spoke. He turned from the panoramic window, his tall, lean frame a stark silhouette against the glittering tapestry of city lights. So, his voice was cool, perfectly modulated, betraying no gratitude or fear. We have arrived. What is the next step, Alvar? What grand design do you have for your newest acquisition? A hot spike of irritation flared in Kyle's gut. His men were still out there, cleaning up the mess, securing the perimeter. He was running on fumes. And Euros, this acquisition had the audacity to question him. My designs are my own concern, Enigma. You are here because your existence serves my purpose. Do not confuse a tactical extraction with an act of charity. Charity was never a variable I entertained, Leo replied, closing the distance between them, his gaze as sharp and piercing as a surgeon's scalpel. But I do require clarity. The Rios Syndicate provides significant funding to these research facilities. You, a leader within that very syndicate, have just forcibly removed me from one. The question is why? What makes me so valuable that you would risk your men and your operation to move me from one prison to another? Kyle bristled at the accusation. Value is a subjective term. You're a biological anomaly, a rare asset. The military had you. It was only a matter of time before the Corvids made their move. Denying them that asset is a sound strategic decision. You are a source of information, a point of leverage, a threat to be understood. He began to pace, his alpha scent flaring with impatience, a subconscious display of authority. He would never admit, especially not to Leo, the unsettling moral dissonance that had been eating at him for months over his familiar Eurostrade's involvement in these horrific labs. Your kind is a chaotic variable, unpredictable. My syndicate wishes to understand the nature of that chaos, not just to extinguish it. Understand or control. Leo's voice dropped to a soft, dangerous murmur. There is a profound distinction between the two, Alpha, and history has shown that your kind has a strong preference for the latter. His gaze held Kyle's, unwavering, assessing, judging. Kyle's jaw clenched. He hated the calm, clear logic in Leo's voice. He hated it because it was undeniably true. The tension only grew in the days that followed. The penthouse became a silent battlefield of wills. One evening, Kyle was reviewing schematics of other labs funded by his family, the weight of his complicity a stone in his gut. Leo broke the silence, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Your organization builds the cages, and then you liberate the very captives you deem to be of value. It is a fascinatingly self-sustaining cycle of exploitation, Alpha. Kyle slammed his palm down on the glass table, the sound a sharp crack in the quiet room. Do not presume to lecture me, Enigma. You have no comprehension of the complexities of this world, of the compromises required for survival. Survival is often used to justify atrocity, Leo countered, his gaze as steady and unyielding as a mountain. But it does not make the atrocity righteous. A familiar surge of alpha rage coursed through Kyle, the primal urge to dominate, to silence this infuriating voice of judgment. But it was immediately followed by that other feeling, that unsettling tremor deep in his core, a dissonant hum in his biology. It always happened when Lear Eurostrade's calm intensity managed to pierce his armor, and it was always amplified when Leo's superior height seemed to loom over him, a constant, silent reminder of that initial affront to his pride. He dismissed it as stress. It's just the pressure of the mission. He uses anger as a shield, Leo observed, noting the predictable spike in Kyle's aggression pheromones. So much force, so little self-awareness. He is a tool, a powerful one. If I can just attune him correctly. And as he watched Kyle, Leo felt a subtle thrumming deep within himself, a curious pull toward this raging, conflicted alpha. It was a faint connection, but it was there, something he had never anticipated feeling for anyone, let alone an alpha. Kyle, accustomed to absolute authority, found his world shrinking to the confines of this glass box with its single, infuriating occupant. Leo refused the role of prisoner, moving through the penthouse as if he owned it, studying, analyzing, always watching. Kyle's instincts screamed at him to put Leo in his place, to force a submission, to re-establish the natural order. But every time he tried, every time he projected his will, that disturbing tremor in his own body grew stronger. accompanied by the insidious whisper of Lear Eurostrade's peculiar center Euro's ascent that both irritated his senses and inexplicably drew him closer. The simple, infuriating fact that he had to tilt his head back slightly to meet Lear Eurostrade's eyes was a constant source of inflammation for his inner Alpha. One night, the culmination of stress, confinement, and Lear Eurostrade's suffocating presence brought Kyle to a breaking point. He found Leo standing by the window again, a dark, ethereal silhouette against the city, his tall frame seeming to drink the light around it, making him appear even more imposing. "What is your game?" Kyle demanded, his voice a low, guttural growl. "What is it you are planning?" Leo turned slowly, his eyes like polished obsidian in the dim light. "The same game as you, Alpha. Survival. The only difference is that my definition of victory is far more Euros absolute." The very air in the room seemed to crackle and ionize. Kyle felt the familiar, unwelcome signs of his approaching rut, magnified tenfold by the exhaustion and the raw, primal frustration. He felt exposed, his control stretched thin, and Lear Eurostrade's presence was a direct, targeted assault on his last reserves of composure. Lear Eurostrade's scent, usually so subtle, suddenly intensified, coiling around Kyle like an inescapable vapor. It was cool and sharp, yet carried an undercurrent of something deeply, strangely alluring. It was utterly alien. It wasn't a Eurostrade tea, the scent of an omega or a beater, designed to trigger instincts of protection or procreation. This triggered something else entirely, something deeper and more complex. Euros, a dizzying, terrifying fusion of challenge and an unwanted, undeniable desire. Control yourself, Kyle. You are the Alpha. You are dominant. His mind screamed the familiar mantra, a desperate attempt to fight back against the sudden, inexplicable urge to simply Euros yield, to surrender to the Enigma before him. The feeling was repulsive, a violation of his very nature. Alphas did not feel this, especially not for a defiant captive who dared to be taller, who made him feel as though he were the one being looked down upon. The thought made bile rise in his throat, a bitter acid that burned his ego. Leo took a step closer, erasing the remaining distance between them, his height a palpable assertion of his presence. His dark, compelling eyes captured Kyle's, holding him in place. He reached out, his long, cool fingers tracing the sharp, tense line of Kyle's jaw. Kyle froze, every cell in his body screaming at him to attack, to dominate, to break this creature. But he was paralyzed. A violent shiver racked his frame, originating from the point of Leo's touch and spreading like an electrical fire through his nervous system. Lear Eurostrade's scent was overwhelming now, a dizzying concoction that bypassed his conscious thought and spoke directly to the most primitive parts of his brain. "You are at war with yourself, Alpha," Leo murmured, his voice a low, silken whisper that scraped against Kyle's raw nerves. He subtly leaned his body into Kyle's space, using his physical advantage to press him back. "It is such a waste of energy. Simpler Euros feel." Kyle felt his body tremble uncontrollably, his breath catching in a strangled gasp. He was reacting in ways he couldn't comprehend, a desperate, clawing need rising from his gutter Euros, not just for physical release, but for something more, something he couldn't name. His own pheromones were a chaotic storm, battling and failing against Leo's cool, commanding presence. He despised this feeling of being overwhelmed, of his ironclad Alpha control fraying like a rotten rope, of Lear Eurostrade's height making him feel small, submissive. For the first time in his life, he felt like a lesser Alpha. The shame was a white-hot brand on his soul. Leo's hand slid from his jaw, down the racing pulse in his neck, to his hips, asserting a silent, possessive claim. Kyler Eurostrayed back arched involuntarily, a choked sound escaping his lips. He hated the weakness, hated the body that betrayed him. But then, as Leo's fingers brushed against him, a jolt, sharper and more violent than anything he had ever experienced, shot through his entire being. It wasn't pain. It was a sudden, brutal surge of energy, like a dormant power line suddenly hit with 1,000,000 volts. His vision fractured into a kaleidoscope of light and color, and his muscles spasmed. Through the haze, he saw Leo's eyes, dark and knowing, holding his gaze. There, Leo breathed, a note of profound, almost reverent satisfaction in his voice. "Something is waking up inside you, Alpha. Something new." With a final, desperate surge of will, Kyle shoved Leo back, stumbling away, gasping for air as if he had just surfaced from a deep, cold ocean. His body was on fire, humming with a strange, unfamiliar energy. He felt her Euros altered. His pheromones were still in turmoil, but now, beneath the scent of his own rage and confusion, there was a new note, a distinct, almost metallic tang. He looked at Leo, his chest heaving, his mind a maelstrom of fury and utter bewilderment. Leo simply watched him, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, the look of a scientist who had just witnessed a successful and long-awaited experiment. The feeling of being so utterly powerless, of being dissected and understood by this creature, was the most infuriating thing Kyle had ever known. This incident left a permanent scar on Kyler Eurostrade's psyche. The tremor was no longer a fleeting reaction to Leo's presence. It was a constant, low-level hum beneath his skin, a fundamental dissonance in the song of his biology. His alpha senses felt warped, unreliable. He tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away as the aftershocks of stress. But Leo would not allow him the comfort of denial. A week later, Kyle was in his private study, hunched over encrypted files that laid bare the syndicator Eurostrade's financial ties to the very labs that had created and imprisoned Leo. The data churned in his stomach. The quiet moral conflict that had always been a background hum beneath his alpha pragmatism was now a deafening scream. He was a man of order and control, yet his familiar Eurostrade's empire was built on a foundation of this filth. The door, which he had locked, opened without a sound. Leo stepped inside, his tall frame once again a commanding silhouette in the doorway. He didn't ask for permission. He simply entered, his intelligent, unsettling eyes taking in Kyle, the scattered documents, and the stench of self-loathing in the room. "Are you troubled, Alpha?" Leo's voice was a low purr, devoid of judgment, a detached observation that made the hairs on Kyle's arms stand on end. Kyle slammed his hand down on the papers, scattering them. "This does not concern you." Leo moved closer, his pace slow, deliberate, predatory. "Everything that impacts your existence is now my concern, Kyle. Especially now." His unique scent, that cool, sharp, subtly sweet aroma, began to permeate the confined space, wrapping around Kyle like a silken shroud. It was stronger tonight, more purposeful, almost demanding. "He's doing it deliberately," Kyle realized with a jolt of panic. His senses screamed but his body was already beginning to hum in resonance. He recognized this feeling now. It was the prelude to that terrifying internal meltdown. "Get out," he rasped, his voice raw with a desperation he despised. Leo ignored the command, his eyes locking onto Kyler Eurostrade's. "You are disgusted by what your family has built, and yet You are its finest product. He reached out, his long fingers brushing Tyler Eurostrade's cheek before sliding down to his neck, applying a light but undeniable pressure. Kyle shuddered violently. The touch was like a key turning in a lock deep inside him, bypassing all his alpha defenses. Your facade is cracking, Kyle, and it is a truly beautiful sight to behold. Kyle fought it with every fiber of his being, a desperate, primal struggle against the rising tide. He tried to shove Leo away, but his limbs were heavy, his muscles unresponsive. His will was dissolving under the insidious influence of Lear Eurostrade's pheromones and the knowing intensity in his eyes. Leo's superior height became a physical weight, pressing down on him, a constant reminder of his loss of control. Kyle's body betrayed him completely, his own pheromones flaring not with dominance, but with a chaotic, desperate mix of fear, desire, and confusion. He felt utterly stripped bare, like an omega on the verge of a full-blown heat, all his defenses torn away. The shame was a physical, suffocating weight. "Do not fight it," Leo whispered, the words seeming to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his mind, overriding his own thoughts. He pressed their bodies together, the heat and friction a jolt of pure, overwhelming sensation. Lear Eurostrade's hands found his hips, holding him, maneuvering him with a surprising strength and absolute control. A whimper escaped Kyle's lips, a sound he barely recognized as his own. He hated it. Hated the way his back arched, hated the uncontrollable need that Leo's touch ignited. He was being completely and utterly dominated, and he was powerless to stop it. The familiar internal tremor intensified, rising from a hum to a violent, systemic shudder. A wave of energy, first cold as ice then searing as fire, surged through his veins, making his vision shatter. He cried out, a raw, inarticulate sound of a soul breaking, as his body convulsed, caught in the violent crucible of being unmade and remade. He smelled it then, the moment of transformation. The strong, familiar notes of his alpha scent were being erased, giving way to that sharp, metallic, alien tang. It was his scent, yet it was the scent of a stranger. When the most violent waves subsided, leaving Kyle panting, disoriented, clinging to Leo for support, he looked down at his own trembling hands, then wildly up at Lear Eurostrade's impassive face. "What are Euros? What is happening to me?" he whimpered, his voice laced with a terror he had never known. "My center Euros, I don't recognize it." Leo's dark eyes, still holding that cold, scientific satisfaction, met his. The time for subtlety was over. "You are not a true alpha, Kyle Santos. You are a dormant Enigma hybrid. Your alpha presentation was nothing more than a dominant, biological shell, a strong facade hiding what has always been sleeping beneath." The words struck Kyle with the force of a physical blow. A harsh, disbelieving laugh escaped him. "That's impossible. My blood linear Euros, we are alphas. Pure, dominant alphas, for generations." A cold sweat beaded on his forehead. The idea was a heresy, a betrayal of his very identity. "Genetics can be a fickle thing," Leo countered calmly, his height once again a subtle tool of dominance, especially when they are subjected to generations of suppression, or when ancient, forgotten lineages resurface. The scientists in your familiar Eurostrade's labs theorized about dormancy. They just never managed to find a living specimen they could fully activate. Until now. Lear Eurostrade's gaze was dissecting him. "Your biological reaction to my presence, to my scent, to our Euros interactions. It follows the theoretical model for a suppressed hybrid perfectly. My own unique biology is the catalyst. My pheromones, My touch euros, they resonate with that dormant part of you. They are the key that is unlocking your cage. A cold dread coiled in Tyler Euro's Drade's gut. He remembered the strange jolts of energy, the uncontrolled tremors, the dizzying loss of control during their confrontations. The way Leo's touch had ignited something both terrifying and new within him. His entire identity, built on that unshakable bedrock of his alpha nature, was crumbling into dust. He was Kyle Santos, the architect, a powerful alpha who commanded fear and respect. If he wasn't Thutter Euros, then what was he? A monster, a genetic defect. The humiliation of being physically smaller than Leo, the constant subtle reminder of his unraveling, gnawed at him. He felt like a fraud, a pale imitation of an alpha whose body instinctively capitulated to a more dominant presence. The thought was unbearable. "Why me?" Kyle demanded, his voice raw with pain. "Why is this happening? Perhaps it is fate, Alpha. Or perhaps," Leo stated, his honesty a brutal slap, "it is because I require a weapon, a very, very powerful one." He began to pace slowly around Kyle, his gaze never breaking contact. The labs tried to weaponize Enigma power. They failed. They broke us, tortured us, but they could never truly comprehend us. You, Kyle, are a bridge. An unforeseen convergence of power. You possess the drive and the physical presence of an alpha, but beneath it all, you hold the raw, untamed potential of an enigma. If you fight it, you will fracture yourself, remaining a weakened, diminished version of what you once were. But if you embrace Eater Euros, you will become unstoppable. A weapon, yes, Leo thought, watching the war of emotions on Kyle's face. But something more as well. This alpha's raw power, his sheer, stubborn refusal to break completely a Euros, it is compelling. There is a primal resonance between us that I have never felt, not even among my own kind. He is not merely a tool. He is Euros, a fascinating variable. For the first time, Leo, who had lived his life guided by the cold, clear logic of survival and revenge, felt a pull of genuine curiosity, a deepening fascination that bordered on something entirely new to him. Kyle stared at him, rage-warring with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. He hated it. Hated the idea that his life had been a lie. Hated that this prisoner held the key to his own true nature. And yet Euros, a deeply buried, primal part of him, was intrigued. Power. He had always craved it, always wielded it. What new kind of power lay sleeping within him? The shame of being manipulated, of feeling less than, was still a potent poison in his veins, but the promise of something greater, something more powerful, was beginning to act as the antidote. Leo sensed the shift in his internal conflict. You can continue to fight it, Kyle. You can struggle and thrash against it, and you will remain a diminished alpha, a pale imitation of your own potential. Kyle flinched at the words. Or, Leo continued, you can embrace it. Let me show you what you truly are. Let me complete the activation. And what is your price? Kyle spat. A weapon, Leo repeated, his eyes burning with an almost zealous fire. A force capable of tearing down this entire corrupt system from the inside out. The labs that created us, the syndicates that grew rich on our suffering. You and I, Kyle, together, we will burn it all to the ground. The proposal was insane, terrifying, and utterly, irresistibly compelling. Kyle, who had been drowning in the morality of his family's crimes, was suddenly thrown a lifeline. A path to a brutal, bloody kind of redemption. He could destroy the very system he had profited from. And in doing so, perhaps he could forge a new identity from the ashes of the old one. His acceptance was not a graceful one. It was a snarled, reluctant surrender. "Show me, but I swear to you, Enigma, if you betray me, I will tear you apart with my bare hands." Leo's lips curved into that faint, unsettling smile once more. "Fair enough, Alpha. Now, let us begin your true awakening." The awakening was not an education. It was an exorcism. It was a relentless, primal stimulation designed to shatter the Alpha shell and release the Enigma within. Leo seemed to understand Kyle's dormant biology on an instinctive level, reading him like a forgotten language. He pushed Kyle to his absolute limits, using their shared, forced intimacy as the primary conduit for the transformation. Kyle despised the feeling of his control being systematically dismantled, his alpha dominance stripped away layer by layer. But the siren's call of the immense power shimmering just beneath the surface of his skin was too potent to deny. "He resists," Leo mused during their first true awakening session. "Predictable. The alpha ego is such a fragile construct." He found a strange, detached satisfaction in the process of breaking Kyle down, of peeling away the layers of learned dominance to expose the raw, unshaped power beneath. He was meticulous, a scientist gauging every reaction, but he was also guided by a primal instinct that transcended mere intellect. These sessions became a dark ritual. Leo was always the initiator, his presence a deliberate, overwhelming assault on Kyle's senses. He was always in control, always the dominant force, his movements precise, his dark eyes never leaving Kyle's face, cataloging every tremor, every gasp, every moment of surrender. His superior height was a constant tool of this dominance, making Kyle acutely aware of being physically enveloped, forcing him to crane his neck, to look up. The activation was a calculated overload of the senses. Leo would guide them into close physical contact, skin against skin, and then, with a deliberate shift of his internal control, he would unleash his unique pheromones. It wasn't a scent that simply filled the air. It was a potent, concentrated biosignal, a dense, intoxicating wave that he could direct, force-feeding it to Kyle through proximity, through the pores of his skin, through every shared breath. This sustained, overwhelming exposure, combined with their escalating physical intimacy, was the engine of Kyle's transformation. The effect on Kyle was immediate and violent. His frayed alpha instincts would revolt against the alien scent that bypassed all his natural defenses. His body would hum with a perverse tension, a Euro's half repulsion, half an undeniable, magnetic pull. This forced intimacy, the primal conflict between dominating and being dominated, would escalate rapidly into an unbearable sensational tension. Kyle Euro's trade's overloaded body would instinctively seek release, and Leo, ever the master of this dark ceremony, would provide it, guiding them deeper into the physical act. "Yield, Kyle," Leo would whisper, his voice a low growl against Kyle Euro's trade's ear, as his pheromones flooded the space, suffocating Kyle's native instincts. Kyle would fight, his muscles coiling, his own scent flaring with frustration and desperate defiance. "Don't you dare," his inner alpha roared, but the resistance was always futile. He hated the vulnerability, hated the way his body betrayed him, arching into Leo's touch, craving the very sensations that were destroying him. The shame of being physically overpowered, of being maneuvered by Leo's stronger, taller frame, was a constant wound to his pride. He felt like a rogue omega trapped in an inescapable rut, his body betraying his mind, desperate for a bond with the very partner who was unmaking him. In these moments, Kyle was forced to confront the wreckage of his former self. His inner alpha raged, screaming against the emasculation, against the submission. But with every session, Another part of him, the nascent Enigma, stirred and grew stronger. It was a terrifying, exhilarating sensation. He could feel a new kind of power coalescing in his veins, a raw, untamed energy that was orders of magnitude greater than his alpha dominance had ever been. It was addictive. He hated Leo for being the source of it, for holding the key, but he also found himself craving the next session, the next jolt of activation, the next step in his horrifying and magnificent transformation. He was becoming a weapon, forged in the fires of submission and shame, and his creator was the very man he had once fought to be his captive. Their roles had been irrevocably, brutally reversed. What do you think of this kind of forced awakening? Is it a necessary evil for Kyle to unlock his true potential, or is it an unforgivable violation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were captivated by this dark and twisted tale of power and submission, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story.